Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, where today I have a very good friend of mine, Emily, who has come on the pod to talk a little bit more about the relationships with food, eating food for health. And of course, Emily, you're a competitor as well, so we can talk about the different phases. So prep, off season, and everything in between, because as we always speak about, there's so much that goes into this sport in regards to your thoughts and feelings around food. And we agree that, sometimes it's maybe not spoken about enough in an open way. We sort of hide behind the highlight reel of Instagram, and, some of the thoughts you have, you feel like you shouldn't maybe voice them because they come across as negative. But of course, for us, it's about empowering people to get those thoughts and feelings off their chest.
Yeah.
So where shall we start, Em? There's a lot to cover.
Yeah, so I think, well, let's start with what we've just talked about. I think we do hide behind Instagram and we hide behind social media and reels, and everything looks pretty and everybody's happy. And I think this can be it can be really difficult if you can't separate Instagram from reality, especially when it comes to food relationships, and then to body relationships as well. I mean, I've got a really good example of, I don't know if I read it in a book or if I heard it when I was doing some extra learning on a podcast, but there are some restaurants now where when you go and order food in that restaurant, you have to sign a disclaimer to say that you're going to eat the food.
Really?
Because you'll get, and it's mainly females, but you'll get females influencers that will go in and they have these perfect figures and they look like they exercise, they're beautiful, they're made up, the hair is perfect, everything about them is perfect. So they are the aspiration of what we want to look like. And they go and they order this food, they order loads, and they film it all, and they take photos where they're pretending to eat it.
Oh,
And they post it, and then it looks like they have eaten it. And actually what they've done is they've taken photos and they've paid for it and they've walked away. So
wow.
that's what you're dealing with. So there is this now association with this perfect figure, perfect person. They were so happy, they enjoyed that food so much, and they could eat all of that food and they could still look that way. And actually that's not reality. That doesn't really happen. So that's where we're at in terms of nutrition versus social media. And I think trying to find that distinguish between the two is the thing that most people will find hard, mainly because they don't realize it's happening.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, similar to that, I've touched on this on the pod previously. When we come to post show and what you may think that you want to eat, can eat, whatever goes around that period, sometimes you look on social media or other people that you've maybe competed against. And, as the example I used before, a bikini competitor may look at a male bodybuilder and see what they're eating and go, well, that's what I'm going to eat. And you've seen, what they're having, but it's a completely different kettle of fish. As bikini, you got tiny girl, and then you've got a male bodybuilder, and there's so much more that goes into it. But it's that what people see and then invest into because they think maybe that's what they should do, like you say, to get a certain body or to look a certain way.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, and yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think we're all individual.
Yeah.
And we all have individual needs, we all have individual goals, and we all have individual values, and understanding that. And there's, when we get off stage, inevitably we're going to crave food. So I'm not going to stand here and be like, I have a perfect rebound out of prep, because it's hard. It is hard, and it doesn't matter how much you are at peace and happy with the way that you look and the way that you feel, you're always going to get off stage and you're going to be like, right, pass me the white chocolate. And actually 2021, I wanted white chocolate and I wanted lasagna, and that was it. But knowing that point to stop, because you can enjoy that food, that's absolutely fine, but eating it or saving it and then eating so much that you're making yourself feel sick. And then what happens next? So typically for the bikini girl, we all know what's happens next. So we then go and do that cardio that our coach told us not to do, or we then don't eat anything for the rest of the day, or we restrict and we just eat protein and veg the next day. And then you get to the end of that and you're hungry again. And then you saw somebody go to a restaurant and order all the sushi plus then all the ice cream. And so you go and do the same thing. And it's just a vicious cycle. So actually, without using the cliche, the food will always be there.
Yep.
The food will always be there because
I'm
luckily we live in this world where food is available. Like, we're really lucky to be living in the UK or the US or somewhere where, do you know what? You're probably always going to have access to food.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, I found over my years of competing, this has got easier, that post-show period. And I always sort of, think in my own mind that actually I sort of almost needed to do it, where I did overeat and I did do things that I wasn't planning to do, or, on reflection, didn't want to do, to then go, I don't want to feel that way again, because as you know, it's so uncomfortable when you do overeat and you go, out of control, not only physically, but mentally, like you touch on there, the self-restriction that follows that. And something that Joe said on last week's pod was that her coach worked with her to say, okay, so if you have done that, the next day go back to your normal food. Don't then go, oh shit, I've fucked it all up, I'm going to self-restrict. And then that could lead to another binge type episode. And then your relationship with food becomes so distorted. And of course, you feel very lonely at these times.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just understanding as well what you are doing is you are entering into disordered eating practices. If you are almost, it's essentially yo-yo dieting, but it could be day by day, or it might even go to the point it's binge restrict, or even to the point of binge purge, which we could actually call then an eating disorder. So it's understanding where that line is between just wanting to eat something and then just overdoing it, but then what you do afterwards. And a lot of it comes down to control. So if you're prepping for however long, so 16, 20, by the time you finish competing, your season might be, it can last all year. Like, especially if you're competing early in the year and then you're doing finals later in the year, you have ultimate control over that whole period. And if you're anything like me, you'll take an oat out to make sure that you'll hit the gram weight, because it's bodybuilding and it's important that we literally, yeah.
I say amen. On reflection,
Yeah.
it's quite neurotic, but I'm exactly the same.
Yeah. And it's, and I wouldn't say that that's a good way to need to be able to then come out of that situation of having that control and allow yourself just to relax, because otherwise you are going to start taking scales to a restaurant and you're going to pick the plain chicken with the plain potatoes and you're going to weigh it out, and then you're going to be that person that took a picture of the food but didn't eat it all because you chose to stick to your macros because you thought that was the right thing to do. And if we really start to like escalate where that can go to, not only are we going down the pathway of disordered eating, you can then get an eating disorder, but then you become risk of things like malnutrition, which I don't think we speak about enough. Like, as a society, we talk a lot about obesity and the impact of eating too much food on risk of diabetes, on heart disease, even on early death. But actually, I'd say that malnutrition is probably worse, because you stop functioning, your body will not function. And that's why the conversations are coming up more and more with female competitors and not getting their cycles back after prep, and still feeling really low after prep because their hormones haven't returned properly. So it's this impact of binging and restricting and binging and restricting and never letting your body settle into something that is healthy.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's a key point for coaches as well, because I always, speak openly and honestly with clients that want to go into a prep, and I say to them, this isn't the healthiest thing you're going to do, because it's not. And with the input of a coach, we can make it as healthy as possible, I like to say, but that's a bit of a weird term. But you know what I mean, in regards to, we can try and keep good fat sources there. Obviously, the fats come lower. We can try and keep micronutrients there. We can try and keep things that are going to help maintain your health for as long as possible. But of course, when you're in a severe deficit, particularly at the tail end of prep, your hormonal function is affected. And like you mentioned earlier, if you're competing in back-to-back shows, or say you qualify earlier in the year for the finals at the end of the year, you're going to be in prep for, potentially up to a whole year. And then that main focus post show and the reverse out is to get you to a healthier state for your hormonal function to start to return, period to come back, all of these things. And I think that sometimes that's neglected in regards to, coaches being open and transparent with clients to say, what you're doing here is an extreme sport, and there are things that come off the back of that, because it's not taken seriously enough at times, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think a lot of, and again, I mean, I'm going to say females just because I follow more females on Instagram. And of course, I am now just relating Instagram versus what is actually happening. But you do see a lot of females that come into the off season, and then it's not that long before they either go into a mini cut or they go into a prep again. And I would question then, were they in the best possible place before they started that prep or that mini cut? And I think it does come down to, again, our relationships with our bodies, but it's okay to put a bit of fat on. And actually, if you take a bodybuilder, a bikini athlete, and it doesn't really matter what stage in an off season she is, if she gets on a beach with people that don't train in a bikini, we would probably say she looks better because we like the curves, we like the ass, we like the cap on the shoulders. Aesthetically, to me, that's better.
For sure.
But we're also sat behind this like bodybuilder screen of, well, you can't see my abs and therefore I'm fat.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
mental.
you're not.
Yeah, because it is, once you get stage lean, like it does distort your view of what lean is. So as an example, Matt will say to me, "You're still lean." For me, straight away, I'm like, I'm not lean. But like you say, to the most of the population, people may look at me physique wise and go, I'd quite like to look similar to that. I mean, I find that quite hard even saying it because I can't imagine anyone wanting to look like me. But, actually in society, being at a leaner composition, it is something that people would only ever dream of at times. But because we've visited stage lean, for us, that's what lean is. And it's not,
Yeah.
it's extreme lean.
Yeah, exactly. And it is dangerous lean. Like, let's be honest. Yeah, you can do a prep as healthy as possible, but it's not healthy. But it's the reason, I guess, why I'm always at peace of doing it is that it's time limited. So I know that I will do my prep for X number of weeks, I will compete for X number of weeks, and then it's over. And even if I then chose to later in the year do finals, I'll know that once those finals are over, it's over. So it is time limited. And then I know that I've got plenty of time then to improve my health afterwards. And like you said, it's where do we focus? So if we're cutting calories out of the diet, when we're taking the fat out, let's take it from the saturated fat sources first, but keeping, I don't know, the avocados or the oils, making sure that you're getting enough vegetables in your diet. So I don't necessarily agree with weighing veg. I would say try and be consistent with it, but not weighing. I'd say don't macro track veg. Personally, be consistent with it. But I think when you macro track it, it becomes the easy thing to remove because it's the stuff later in prep that you actually don't want to eat. You want to eat a bagel. Yeah. So, but making sure that you've at least got variety, and you might want to stick to more green based vegetables, but having a variety of those, and then making sure that you're topping up with any multivitamins or specific vitamins that you might well be missing out on. So it's being really aware of what it is that you can do to maintain health during prep. And it is the coach's role. Like, I do think it's the coach's role because they should be educated enough to give you that information. But as a client, I would make sure that you're asking.
Yeah, for sure. This is what I love about coaching. Like when I get asked questions, I'm like, keep asking me more. And like you said, there's different ways to do preps. Previously, I've always tracked veg, salad, and everything. And for me, I think at a first timer point of view, that was really cool because I was able to, with the tuition alongside that, I was tracking all my veggies, fruits, etc. But then, when we were reducing macros, Stephen would say to me, okay, so we're reducing macros, but it will be from items like X, Y, and Z. And that also facilitated me being able to track accurately. And because I'm quite controlling, I liked that I was tracking everything. But then you have, some clients that might be a bit more suited to, if they're experienced in this, they've tracked for a long time, etc. They know that green beans and broccoli are similar macros, or things like this, and the volume is there. They can be trusted, as it were, to go, okay, so I have a handful of this. So it is really, like you say, person dependent, and as you said earlier, everyone's an individual, but this is our job as coaches to understand the individual and then do it appropriately to that person's goals and how their personality works as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's really exciting as well when you do start to go down this route with clients. Like, it really does excite me when you can put this knowledge into coaching and say, you know, this is the sorts of things we want to include in your diet, and they're learning and they're saying, oh, I tried this and it was really, you know, a lot of volume, never tried it before, but I felt, you know, fuller for longer in a dieting phase. And like all of these little things you learn. Also, if you step away from stage, or there's people around you, you know, learning from you as well, and they don't compete, this is life skills, and a bit what we're going to talk about today more as well, you know, nutrition for health. It's about understanding, like you mentioned, they're different fat sources. You know, sometimes in bikini girl's mind, I think it's like fat's going to make you fat. That's what I always thought. And it's
Yeah,
until
sure.
you learn, you know,
Yeah.
actually fats are needed for your hormonal profile and to help you feel good and sleep and all of these things. And it's like, but it's fat.
Yeah.
It's
But just because
crazy.
you eat fat does not make you fat.
For sure. And I think as well, you know, like we were speaking about post show earlier, that regaining of hormonal health, you know, you are going to have periods of foods that have got more of your saturated fats and things like that. But of course, you know, you've been on lower fats for quite some time, or most people will be in a prep, the lower carbohydrates, and actually to include different foods. Okay, they might be not what we call the good fats, the good carbs, but you can start to incorporate different foods. And I imagine you have similar conversations with clients in regards to what foods they can include in different phases.
Yeah, sure. And I try, so I work with lifestyle clients.
Yeah.
But the first thing that I'll always do, because it tends to always come up, is this good food versus bad food, and try and break those barriers, because there isn't a good food and a bad food.
Yeah.
So ultimately, when you digest food, you digest it down into the sugars, the fats, the proteins, or the amino acids, and your body doesn't go, well, that fat came from that source, or that carb came from that source. It doesn't care. It just wants the nutrients. So yes, there are more calorie dense foods with less micronutrients, and there are less calorie dense foods with more micronutrients. And especially off season, you need to make sure that you are still incorporating those less calorie dense and more micronutrient dense foods.
Yeah.
And you know, and then when you go into a prep, you're the first thing you're going to do is cut back on anything that's calorie dense and not offering a lot of micronutrients. But knowing the difference between the two, so knowing where to cut from, I think is really important. So you know, if you're in your off season and you're really pushing the calories and you're having a cookie pre-workout, that's probably the first thing that can come out, because it's not offering any nutrition benefit other than the calories. But yeah, it's really, but saying that, when you then come out of your prep, putting that cookie back in, because you were probably craving it anyway. And because if we suddenly put it into a food plan, it becomes normal. And therefore you sort of take away that craving. It's like saying, don't press the red button. All you want to do is press the red button. So if I say don't eat the donut, all you want to do is eat the donut.
And
But if you had but if you had a donut maybe once or twice a week, it becomes normal. It's not as exciting, and therefore you don't have the same cravings around it.
Yeah, that's such a relevant point, actually. And I don't know if it's something we've discussed on the pod before, because I've definitely found that this off season and experiencing, like you say, you know, having a couple of a donut and a muffin or whatever over a week, me and Matt have these conversations. I don't get to the point where I'm like, I really want baked goods. And previously, you know, I'm open and transparent about it. I have got a very good capability of eating. And, you know,
Same.
yeah, and you would wait till your off-plan day, which was maybe a Saturday, and then you would have a Five Guys and 3 bakes. And it's like, you know, the calories are smashed out the park. Or you might have a bake on a Tuesday as well as your normal foods and incorporate that as a 1,000 calorie topper on that day. And then, you know, later in the week, you might have the same again, or you might go for a meal and have a bake. And your relationship with food, of course, is then enhanced because you're able to then enjoy the foods and sit down and eat them, rather than all week you're waiting. And then, you know, you take your foot off the gas. And of course, it then leads to potentially those relationships with food where the next day you actually feel like shit. Physically, you feel like shit as well, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And some of the clients I work with, they'll come to me because they find that they binge. So whether they are binging and restricting, or binging and purging, or it's just kind of a self-classification of I eat a lot of food. But I would always say to them, well, how does it taste? And most of the time they can't tell me. because they didn't try and taste it. They just saw food and ate it because because all week they'd been good. And then on the weekend, they were like, right, let's get it all in. So that food has then not served any purpose whatsoever. So the reason you wanted that food, whether it be cookie, donut, whether it's something savory, is because you really wanted to taste it, but you didn't taste it. So what was the point?
Yeah.
So actually, and we before we started recording, we were talking about this slightly, but eating to satiety rather than fullness. So eat slowly, enjoy the food, and eat till you feel satiated, so you feel like that food's done its job. Don't eat to the point that you're like, oh, okay, I can't move, and now I want to be sick, and now I regret it. And like, regret around food is the worst. Like that's awful.
Yeah, it's a very scary place we find ourselves in as competitors as well. And even, you know, people that have done quite a serious diet, it can have the same effects. You eat the food, you then, you know, might be in bed and you're visualizing, okay, I ate that. So how many calories are there in that? So how much have I gone over on calories? So how much cardio should I then do to offset that? Should I do more steps? Da, 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 da. And particularly in a growth phase, you know, and off the back of a prep in the recovery period at the start there, you're actually trying to push up body weight and get to a point where you are in a calorie surplus. But I think, you know, when you're confined to a prep, you forget that you are going to be at a point where you're going to be in a surplus because you've been institutionalized for so long, and, you know, you're used to feeling like shit, and you become married to that feeling. And it's like, this should always be hard. And it's something I always talk to a lot of people about, you know, this lifestyle doesn't need to be hell.
Yeah, you can enjoy it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and
crazy.
I so eat like pre bodybuilding again as a female, and it's certainly males as well. We're almost now conditioned to be small, to be the smallest we can possibly be, which is disgusting because I think there is no value, or there should be no value placed on what you look like and what body you're in, but there is. So we always want to be small, and then we start bodybuilding and we grow a bit, and then we do our first prep and we got on stage and we're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And now we're the smallest we've ever been, but it's okay because we were prepping, and now you're told to put weight on.
Yeah.
Well, that's so anti, it's so
Yeah.
not what we've ever really envisioned for ourselves, that it becomes really difficult. And actually, so what I would say in that at that point is maybe don't weigh yourself.
Yep.
So as a bodybuilder, you're probably doing your check-ins with photos or with videos. That should be enough for your coach to be able to see. And for you personally, if you then start looking at what your body is doing, so it's growing again, and then look at, well, how's your energy levels? How's your sleep being? Did you get your cycle back? How do you feel? Like, are you suddenly happy? Oh, it's because you ate more food and because you were putting weight back on because you weren't meant to be that small. So
Mm.
it's trying to almost take that goal away, or that the goalposts away from just scale weight and looking at something else that you can really, that adds value to your life. Have that as your next step.
Yeah, because I think we also forget how it is to feel good. You know, I'm only probably 2, 3 days ago, I got to the point where I was like, okay, I've actually got energy for a whole day.
Yeah.
And this is like 11 weeks post show. And it's like, that's taken that long to get to this spot. But you just get used to feeling like that. You don't really know what it is to feel normal. And of course, you know, if you compete year on year, you're never probably really getting to a point. You're probably going to start feeling good and then prep's on the radar again. So for years, you're used to feeling like that. So it's like, oh, well, this is normal. And it's not till you feel better. And I know that you're an advocate of, you know, having a year in between shows. And like we've spoken about before, you know, you and Alex enjoy life. And it's a really nice thing to see on your stories, on your Instagram of, you know, you two go for food and you just enjoy it because it's food, not, okay, so I'm going to absolutely smash everything here. You can just see, I can see from the food you pick, it's a palate experience.
Yeah, sure. I love food. Like, this is why I do what I do. I actually just generally like food. So we're going for sushi for tonight. Like,
Yeah.
that's what we're doing tonight. And I so for me, when they brought out calorie labeling on menus in restaurants, I personally don't like it. So I see how it can benefit people, and I have clients that it does benefit because they have specific goals, but they also want to be able to go out for food. So it's not that they're necessarily going to pick the lowest calorie option, but they are going to view and go, okay, well, do you know what? Today, I've been out for food 3 times this week. Today, my goal is really important, and therefore I will stick to, I don't know, under 800 calories, because then I can fit the rest of my day around it, and that's fine. Personally, I don't like it because the only time I'm bothered about the calories that I eat when I'm going out for an experience is when I'm on prep, and then I actually wouldn't go out for the experience. I would go for a coffee because I can just have a black coffee, or I do something that's an activity that doesn't have to revolve around food. So for me, going out and looking at a menu and seeing it's calorie labeled almost makes me just go, oh, I just can't be bothered. Like, it makes me not want to be there, because I'd rather just not see that, and I choose for flavor, because like we're really busy people, and we make food and we eat it. We don't have time to make these amazing culinary experiences. So when I go out and I pay someone to do that for me, I'm going to have the thing that I enjoy the most, regardless of the calories. And then what I'm not going to do is the next day is then worry about how many calories that I've eaten, because it's food.
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. Like, I have this conversation a lot. If you're, say, in the queue at a Costa and it's got all the calories there, me X amount of years ago, if I was then going to have that as like an off-plan thing, a tiffin and a coffee, I'd just choose the lowest calorie version because it was the lowest calorie version. And it might only be 19 calories different. But to me, it was like, well, I'm a bodybuilder, I need to calorie count. Those 19 calories are going to count. And actually, for me, I agree with you. When I see calories on menus and food options, it puts me off. And Matt will actually say the calories are listed there. Do you want me to just read out the menu? Because I just don't want to know. I want to have, I want to immerse in that experience. And because we know about calories and whatever else, it does take an element of enjoyment away from it for me. But like you say, I understand how it could be useful for people that are calorie counting and don't know anything about calories.
Yeah, sure. And I think you've just got to remember that, so we're talking about off season, but life is for living, and it's about the memories that we create. So if we're always absorbed in the macros or the calories of the food that we're eating, we're always deprioritizing just enjoying life. Because if you're reading a menu and you're picking based on calories rather than based on taste, you're probably also not listening to the conversations that are going on, because you're like, well, that one is 900 calories and that one is 800 calories, and I prefer that one, but maybe I can ask for it without sauce and then it'll bring the calories a little bit. So you're completely removed from everything that's going on around you. And it's quite a sad place to be. So please have that goal, be a good bodybuilder. When you're on prep, do as I do, weigh everything to the gram, do what you're told by the coach. In your off season, there is absolutely no reason why once a week or once every 2 weeks or even just once a month, you can't just go and just enjoy food, because no one's progress is set back by one meal.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, as bodybuilders, we do become used to certain foods, like you say in a prep, being controlled and on that diet of, similar foods every day, because that often becomes a little bit easier, and you know what the macros are, etc. Of course, when we're talking about food for health and nutrition for health, you're limiting different food groups, different foods, and that of course can lead to actual health concerns, because if you then off the back of a prep still don't have those foods, I know people that have become almost quite sensitive to something like dairy because it's not present in their diet. They then go into off season and they incorporate something that's higher in dairy. They start getting repercussions, and they're, trying to work out what it is. Why have I got bloating, X, Y, and Z? And then it comes down to, however long they've restricted that food group for, it then becomes an irritant to the system because they haven't included it. So then when we're talking about health, you got to think of that type of thing when we're talking about the food selection as well.
Yeah, sure. And like, variety is key. So I think you do have to be aware that you're going to cut out things during prep. So the variety of your diet's not going to be enough. It is going to be restrictive. And reintroducing things slowly back into your diet is important. So, for sure, go and have some cheese or some milk or something with dairy in it and have plenty of it. if it does leave you feeling a bit bloated, maybe a bit sick, then potentially you've developed a lactose intolerance. That doesn't mean you'll keep a lactose intolerance. It probably just means you had too much of it, so scale back. So if you enjoy having cheese, continue to do so, but just introduce it slowly. But yeah, so 100% agree, variety is key. And you do have to consider as well that you've always got people that are a bit fussy and actually they don't really like that many foods. But this is again where supplements are okay. So some people are a bit resistant around having supplements because they're artificial and they're man-made and blah blah blah, but actually they're just convenient ways of making sure that you get everything you need to get. So food first, but if you are struggling, just supplement your diet, go for it.
Yeah, for sure. And on that note, you know, similar to when you're in a prep, using things that are the calorie-free options. So it's something that I've definitely done in the past, and I know a lot of people that do that, you know, the skinny food things and stevia, all of these different things that are calorie-free or very low calorie. I
Yeah.
actually feel like potentially for me, that actually caused a lot of bloating and irritants to my system when I was ODDing on that type of stuff.
Yeah, so if we look at these foods, so there's two different things that are in play here. So there's sweeteners, which are they're intense sweeteners. So basically, you're removing the sugar and you're putting something else in there to sweeten the food. But that sweetener will have either no or very little calories. So this is things like stevia. So that's probably not causing a problem because you're having it in such a low amount in that food that even if you eat loads of food that contains it, it's not enough to irritate your digestive system. The problem that, so any liquids are usually fine. The problem that you find is the bulk sugar replacers. So when they take out sugar, they're taking out bulk.
Yeah.
And they have to replace that bulk with something. And if it's a solid food, you can't replace it with water, you can't replace it with air. So you have to put something else in it. So they're usually what we call sugar alcohols, or polyols, and they're or really they're very high in fiber, and that can be then quite irritable to the digestive system. So that's where you can start seeing lots of problems. So either bloating, diarrhea, constipation, so all the nasty things. And this is where you have to think, okay, so I had something that maybe tasted nice and it served a purpose because I was starving and I needed something low calorie. But if my digestive system isn't working properly, am I getting everything that I need to get out the rest of the food that I'm eating? So it's so available now. It's an easy trap to fall into of just having all of the skinny products. Having some is absolutely fine, a little bit of skinny tomato ketchup or skinny jam on some bread or whatever. But when you're having it a lot with every meal, it can cause some pretty serious issues with your digestive health. And usually it's just a case of remove them and then you'll be fine. So yeah, just look out for the bulk sugar replacers. Intense sweeteners absolutely fine, but bulk sugar replacers are the things that usually get people.
Yeah, for sure. Because stevia, as an example, you know, that sits fine for me. I don't have any
Yeah,
problems off the back of that.
yeah.
When I go into, like we talked about, you know, like replacement foods that are labeled skinny, that's when my digestive system's like, hold up. And I think that, you know, in the past, I would definitely go towards having those things quite a lot in an off season. And
Yeah.
it's, you know, through the tuition of your coach and learning different foods that you don't need to necessarily have those foods in the off season because you've got the calories there to facilitate having more whole foods and more palate experiences, you know,
Yeah.
having nut butter on your meal rather than a skinny version of that, or, you know, examples like that. But of course, then you've got the psychological elements of accepting foods that you haven't had in a prep and you've relied on, like you say, you're starving and you think, oh, I have those really low calorie noodles or whatever, and then you're still
Yeah.
having off season and it's like
Yeah.
they taste like shit but they offer volume. I mean,
Well, yeah, so,
yeah, I mean some people might like them, but it's like cauliflower rice. I don't know about you, but I
oh,
just find it disgusting. And when people have it in off season, I think, why are you having that in off season?
so we sell grenade bars in the gym, obviously, because all gyms will. And
Of course.
everyone always says to me, "What's your favorite flavor?" I'm like, I absolutely hate them. So I would much rather have a protein shake and a Freddo.
Yeah, yeah,
Same
it's
thing,
so
really.
yeah, and actually protein bars, like you say, I have a client, Vic, who she was trying some different things. Now she's in off season, and you know, we're pushing calories up a bit more, so she's trying different foods. And she had a protein bar one day, and then that ended up off the back of it, you know, she
Cat's
had
just come to join me.
she
Don't
had
mind the cat.
yeah, well, you're allowed, that's cool. She had some negative effects from that and didn't feel too good after having it, digestive wise and what have you. And I think that sometimes we can forget things like protein bars and what have you, you know, they taste good for a reason. There is additives in there.
Yeah, exactly. But even then, I'd say that what food are you trying to replace with either the protein bar or the skinny noodles or whatever? And in an off season, just actually compare the taste to the real thing, and you'll always find that the real thing tastes better. And I think when you actually do that taste comparison, you're really annoying me, Tiger. When you actually do that taste comparison, you'll realize that it is worth sacrificing those calories for the real food. And again, it comes down to enjoyment and experience. It's just going to offer you so much more if you have the real food.
Yeah, for sure. Of course, in prep, you do like, I don't know, it's like a skill almost. Once you've done it a few times, you shut off that you don't want these foods because you know that they're not a possibility in a prep. You know, like me and you, if I'm doing a prep, I'm doing a prep. You know, there's no deviating from the plan. So you tell yourself, I don't really like pizza. I don't really like X, Y, and Z. And I've done this. And then when I've tasted these foods, you know, when I'm out for a nice meal and I might have one slice of pizza or whatever, and I've gone, oh my God, if I'm going by taste, that was, you know, a really nice, delicious homemade Italian pizza. But I
Yeah.
told myself I don't like pizza. I don't like this. I don't like that. Because you become this sort of, I guess, bodybuilding robot. And then
Yeah.
it is. And then when you can experience food and taste it, you're like, maybe this isn't so bad.
Yeah, exactly. And it just I suppose it kind of highlights that we are, as bodybuilders, we're all just building this disordered practice around food. But like I said, it's kind of okay as long as it is time limited. And I think, so if you're watching this and you haven't competed yet and you're going to be a first time competitor this year, I think using tools like these conversations of the people that have done it and the people that are experienced around it can be really helpful. I think most people have to go through that first prep and that first difficulty coming out of that prep. They just have to experience it. But at least if you know where you can sit down and you can listen to some experience and a bit of a reality check really about what have you just done and what are you actually doing. And I mean, it's kind of no secret, I'm not trying to be a pro. I do this because I absolutely love training and I love the sport itself, but I don't really have any passion to become a pro bodybuilder. But even if you do, that doesn't mean that you can't have these good experiences in your off season. So like I said, one meal isn't gonna, you didn't not get your pro card because you had one meal that you didn't macro track. And I do sometimes find it sad when I've got people that I'm friends with that I'll see on Instagram, and they've weighed out the tomatoes in the off season. I'm a bit like, really? Like, was life not a little bit too short to actually count out the number of cherry tomatoes you put on your plate? So yeah, just have a little bit of a reality check, I guess, and just make sure that you are, consider how important just general experience are to you, and consider where food falls within that, because it's probably quite high.
And know that you can be a bodybuilder and enjoy life and appreciate time with family and friends and creating memories, because we said before we jumped on, life is short, and you do get into a mindset of being a bodybuilder that you have to be doing your best all the time. And I think you sort of convince yourself from external pressures and what have you that unless you're nailing every single macro, every single part of every single phase, you're maybe not a real bodybuilder. And actually, what are you doing it for? Like you say, you're doing it for a challenge. And when we talk about pro athletes, that's their job. That's what they're doing as a job. They put on their Instagram and what have you, what they want to put on to, the companies that sponsor them, all of the other things that go into this. But it's not your reality. And I think that sometimes we just feel this external pressure to live our lives like them, but it's a very different kettle of fish.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think you, again, just remember that even with Instagram, people show you what they want you to see. So if they want to say, I'm a pro bodybuilder and all I do is eat on a plan, that's fine. They can say it. Do I believe them? No, I don't believe them. Like, come on, they went out for dinner last night with their husband or their wife. Like, of course they did, because they have a life too. And there's always going to be more. And also, bodybuilding is kind of short lived. Like, I know you can do it for many, many years and you can go into all these categories, but at the same time, like, it's not got complete longevity. So just having something that, don't lose all your friendships outside of bodybuilding just because you wanted to be a bodybuilder and because you didn't want to go and eat with them. So yeah, I just think making memories and experiences in life is just more important, and bodybuilding should be a part of it, but it shouldn't dictate it.
Yeah, for sure. And when we talk about nutrition for health, we are both talking about mental health as well.
Yeah, sure.
Your choices around food, what you're learning about food, all of the things that go into being a bodybuilder, whether that's you compete or you don't compete, there is so much that goes through your mind. And if this is quite an internal journey, we'll have people listen that don't have people around them that are into bodybuilding, and actually podcasts and things are their only sort of relief, as it were,
Yeah.
to relate to people. And you've got to think about this from that point of view. Like you say, it's fairly short-lived in regards to, if you're competing, you may only do that for X amount of years. So where does that leave you out of this, competing, and when you're in this space, where do you then go with your life? Because if you've got these limiting thoughts, it can really affect the whole of your life.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's so the nutrition and health really comes into this as well, because your sport might not have longevity, but you should have longevity. So the longer that you're restricting, the longer that you're spending in calorie deficits, or the longer that you're spending in this sort of yo-yo coming out of it, the more negative impact you're having on your health. And food is a big indicator of health. So there's always going to be the person that's super healthy that just gets the unlucky card and they get poorly. But then you do get a lot of people that are sick because one of the factors that contributed to it was they weren't eating enough variety, they weren't getting enough micronutrients, they weren't necessarily getting enough macronutrients. And it's now the cat is hitting the camera. And so it's you have the food that you choose goes some way to dictate health outcomes later on. So if you are, you're going to get to maybe 40, 45, 50, and you're going to say, I'm going to draw the line, I'm not going to compete anymore. You still want to have a really good quality of life. You don't want to be left with gut issues. You don't want to be left with poor relationships with food that then lead to heart disease or diabetes. I know it sounds really extreme, but this is what happens. So it's just having this awareness now, that what you're choosing to do is going to have an impact later on in life.
Yeah, for sure. Because of course, every time you do a prep, there is that, I guess, in the background, you are potentially taking time off the end of your life in regards to, getting extremely lean, where that then heads. And then, of course, especially when you're starting out your bodybuilding journey, you might be in your early 20s. It's so exciting. You've got this possibility of getting really lean. You've never seen your physique like that before, etc., etc. This then turns into multiple seasons, and you do this several times, and you don't maybe think about, well, when I'm 50, I might have some repercussions here of digestive issues, even things like your period, your bowel function, your organ health, all of these things that, when you go into a prep, you are, in essence, it's controlled starvation, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I think from the one that I think a lot of females can relate to, because we do see it every time we do prep, is the loss of periods. And I think it can definitely be seen as something quite convenient because you don't need to worry about it. Obviously you're losing any risk of getting pregnant. So should you not want to have a child, then that's also great. But if you want to have a child in the future, it's important that you get your menstrual cycle back as soon as possible. And then equally, and this is what I mean when I'm talking about the long-term health effects, if you don't have your period for numerous years, your risk of osteoporosis, osteopenia skyrockets, because estrogen is so important when it comes to bone health. But then there's also the mental health aspect, so how it affects the way that you feel. So you might just think that you're quite a sad or low or depressed person, and actually you were. It's just that you didn't have your hormones. And that, it is really important that we make people aware of that. And that's why I would, your goal has to shift after a prep. Your goal has to shift, and it has to go towards health. And part of that is eating enough food and eating good quality food, and making sure that you're getting all the vitamins and minerals that you need anyway, and really homing in on those things that you might have not had enough of during the past however many weeks or months.
Yeah, it still blows my mind, how hungry you get off the back of a prep when you spent so long in a deficit and you're able to maintain that. Yes, it's hard. You are hungry, but you deal with that in a prep and you sort of find ways to combat that. And then it's almost like after the show that night when you get that sort of element of freedom and what have you. And after that, that is the period where the majority of competitors will struggle, because you just feel ravenous, and that is, you've got ghrelin effect, you've got your hunger hormones, everything's completely out of whack. And also, of course, psychologically, because you have that freedom, you're like, okay, well, I want to eat it all. And that's where, it is trying to learn when you are full, when you are satiated. But I don't think we maybe know if we are when you've been, in a deficit for so long.
Yeah, I guess you're losing that ability to self-regulate. And I'd say that, I don't know how many people do this, but going into a prep for the wrong reason, so going into the prep because you just want to be lean, it's not right. You have to do it for the love of the sport, because generally, if you've already got those disordered eating practices around food and this inability to understand hunger and fullness cues, you're not going to fix that through prep. That's not going to happen. Like, being a bodybuilder doesn't fix anything. So making sure that you are of a sound nutritional mind beforehand becomes really important. And actually, it's why I would always say that if you are thinking about competing, so if you're watching this and you've not competed before and you're thinking about doing it, pick a coach and do at least some of an off season with them. Because if you are suffering from any of these disordered eating practices and not necessarily realizing you are, they should be able to help you identify that. And I'd speak to them about it, because you can already have plans in place throughout a prep for then going back into off season of how you're going to manage that. Because it can be very difficult. It is very difficult. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, and it also, in a similar light, if you are struggling around your relationship with food and you do look to work with a coach, sometimes it's establishing, just getting that behavior around food and, actually realizing things that trigger the disordered eating, that, are leading to that, and learning about different foods, because I work with a lot of people that aren't really aware of what macros are serving their physique goals. And that tuition from a coach can really help. The main example for bodybuilding is protein. How is that going to be important for your physique goals? And then learning about that and starting to control your diet, not in, that point where you're at that tail end of prep and then you start thinking, oh God, I don't know what to do with these thoughts and feelings, because they've been there for so long, and it sort of exacerbates that.
Yeah, sure.
It's crazy, because before bodybuilding, I didn't have any problem with food, and then and then it's like, what is this? Why has this happened to me? And it brought out this narcissism that I didn't even realize I had. But there's so much that comes from this sport in regards to mentally and physically, from how you can evolve, but also how you can then become quite detrimental to your own self and what you're trying to, like you say, what you're trying to get from the sport. What is your why? Why do you want to compete? Why do you want to try this lifestyle of bodybuilding?
Yeah. Do it for the love of the sport, not for the love of just the physique. And understand that, I mean, we do look at these physiques and we judge them in a nice way, as in like we like looking at them. But how did they get there? So they weren't, no one was born with that amount of muscle mass. So they had to, so every pro that you look at had to go through a period of time where they were eating a lot of food. But how they utilize that food is then what built their physique. So they went and they ate a lot of food, but it meant they could train really hard. And having that love to of the energy that you have, so you can train really hard, that's what will make a good bodybuilder. But you see a lot of the pros in off season, they still look relatively lean, but I'd like to think, unless they are, you know, genetically, they do just put on muscle mass quite easily. They probably all had at least one season when they went really big. I've just been through it. I've just had my one season, because before I never, it's not that I didn't push my food up and I didn't eat in the surplus, but it was more that I didn't hold myself accountable to keep pushing. So I have now been the biggest I've ever been, but also my body has reaped the benefits of it. So, you know, I was completely at peace of doing that, and I wanted to have this really big push, and now it's great and I feel great. And, you know, I can continue my bodybuilding journey knowing that I have done all the things that I wanted to do, that I enjoyed doing, but then I needed to do to push my physique to the next level. So
Yeah, I really like what you said there about training as well. It's nice when you get a client that's, you know, had a love of training for a couple of years, but never really delved into a surplus or a deficit, maybe tried a bit of dieting, tried, you know, pushing up a little bit, but maybe got to a point where it became slightly uncomfortable, pull back, go into a mini cut, then try and do it again, and go through all of these different phases, but in such short bursts of time. And then you can start to go, okay, so what can we get from your investment in training for a few years? And you've never really felt like you've got to a spot, you know, you've seen out a phase, and then it's like, okay, so let's go into a diet or an off season or whatever it may be. And what you can uncover there is, you know, even more passion for a sport, but it gives a goal rather than you're just doing it and you don't really know where you're heading. And it's quite a funny spot, isn't it? You know, when you train and you think, I look okay, but I don't really know where it's going.
yeah. Yeah, well, it's why I got into bodybuilding in the first place, because I used to swim. And of course, when you swim, you just have a race and you're always aiming to be better at that next race. And then I fell in love with training in the gym. And it's like, well, what do I do with this? Because I'm a competitive person. I need to make it into a competition. And so that's why I fell into bodybuilding. So it was, I mean, it was pre. Did I have I want to say I had Instagram, but it was pre really using Instagram. And I think, you know, people were still looking at magazines. So that's kind of where I came from with training. So it wasn't actually about the physique. It was just being able to do something with what I was enjoying doing in the first place. Yeah. So that's it. Do it for the love of training. Please do it for the love of training.
Yeah, because of course, if you've already got that there as an undercurrent, you know, it's really nice to then fuel that passion of, you know, training and enjoying that, to go, oh, okay, like you say, I'm going to turn this into something competitive. I'm going to see how I go. And it goes alongside being realistic with what you want to get from the sport. So we've touched on, you know, how pros work. When you decide to go into this sport, it's about being realistic with your expectations. You know, what do you want to get from it? And if it's going to be, you know, you want to go into it and you want to place, are you competitive? And it's having a coach that's going to be honest with you in that regard as well, because we can all look at Instagram and go, I want to look like that, I want to do that, but in reality that's a different person. We've already touched on, you know, different genetic makeups, but you know, if you want to be competitive in the sport, the different phases all require a lot of commitment, including, like you've done, pushing up past comfort zones.
Yeah, and with that as well, I think one of the reasons why we start to feel uncomfortable is because we don't change our clothes.
Yeah.
So we try and squeeze our off-season bodies into our prep clothes, and then when they feel uncomfortable, we're like, "Oh my god, I'm fat, and now I need to diet." Actually, you were just really small, and your clothes are too small. So just buy clothes to fit your body. Don't make your body fit your clothes.
Yeah,
And that is a life lesson. That is not just a bodybuilding lesson, because guess what? Your body changes throughout life, and that's okay. So it's all right if you don't fit into the shorts that you fit into when you were 16, because you're now a real woman. So, you know, you've got to think about these things as well. So that, you know, you are going to have to push your body to an uncomfortable place, the two extremes of uncomfortable places. So allow your lifestyle around that to suit.
Yeah, for sure. I really like that as well, because Vic, who I mentioned earlier, she did exactly the same. She was like, I'm putting on clothes and I just feel like they're getting a bit uncomfortable. And then it was like, why am I putting on these clothes? And then so she's got, like I've got, a prep wardrobe and an off-season wardrobe. And then when you come back down in a prep, you put the clothes on and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot this bit. And that's like, it's quite a cool thing in a prep as well, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's those forgotten clothes that you really liked, but you just don't fit into at the moment.
Sure. It's such a strange sensation when you do push up, like you said earlier about, weighing scales and maybe having periods of time where you don't weigh yourself, and embracing different ways to monitor your progress, as it were, because you do get so hung up on things like scale weight and how your clothes fit, all of these things. But actually, are you, like we mentioned earlier, are you feeling better? Are you able to last the whole day rather than, it gets to 5 o'clock and you're flagging? All of the
Yeah.
things, are you more intentful? Can you sit and have a meal and engage in conversation? Because this is something I'm very guilty of. I'll be, like you said earlier, looking at the options and thinking, how many calories is that going to be, rather than, oh, how is my friend that I'm having an hour with?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
It,
Well,
it's this it's sort of this term balance, isn't it? It's a bit of a
yeah.
weird term, because what is balance, and it's individual to everyone, but it is, like you said right back at the start, food is there to be enjoyed, but bodybuilding, to a certain degree, I don't want to blame it on bodybuilding, but it does take away elements of that, because at different points in your journey you will need to restrict what you're having. But learning to get that love back for food, socializing, enjoying life is super important.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, isn't it? So I can sit here as a nutritionist and as an appetite psychologist, and I can go, food is important. You need to enjoy food, but I can also sit here as a bodybuilder and go, you're going to have to be strict and dedicated throughout parts of your entire season, and that's also okay. But I think the important thing, like we talked about earlier, is it's time limited. And even when you're on prep, you don't have to not have any nice experiences. So I will make sure that I'm still going to see friends, but I will make sure that that is around a coffee. So I'm not bothered about sitting and watching someone eat cake, because in that period of time, that's not my priority, is my goal. But I can have a black coffee and I can have a conversation. If it's towards the end of the prep, I'm probably going to be flagging in that conversation and let other people carry it. But
Yeah.
I can at least be present and I can listen, or doing something that actually is then conducive of my goals. So rather than take my dogs out on my own, I'll invite a friend to come with me. So I'm still spending quality time with them, but knowing that, like I said, in the next 16, 20, 30 weeks, the next time I see that friend or the next time I go and see my parents, I will for sure eat that roast dinner and have the dessert on the side. That's fine too.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we could finish with the analogy you said about before we jumped on, when we were talking about where we're both at, where you said about the values and the goals, how that sort of realigns in the phases.
Yeah. So it's something that I talk to a lot of clients about, but you all have goals and we all have values. So if you are on prep, your goal is your prep. So it is getting in stage condition in the set period of time. So that will take priority for that time. But when you are in your off season, actually, it's really important that your values become more important than your goals. Not all the time, but for some of it. So it's just about prioritizing the difference. So, what are your goals? What are your values? And what's most important in this moment? And then it comes back down to be present in that moment and really align those thoughts. So, I'm in my off season. I've not seen my family for 6 months. They want to go out for dinner. I'm not going to check the calories on a menu and I'm just going to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Or versus I'm in prep. My goal is to get on stage in condition. I actually don't want to eat something off plan. So I'll invite my friend out for a walk. I'll invite my friend out for just a coffee and I'll do that instead.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to view it, because people can then resonate with, sometimes in our minds as bodybuilders, we need sort of, I guess, analogies to think of and visualize and get it through into our head that, there's going to be different points of your journey where priorities change, and that's okay. You are able to enjoy life in certain phases a bit more than others, or work around, what you take enjoyment from. So I think this is going to be a very, very valuable lesson to the listeners. And
I hope so.
yeah, and I really thank you for your time and putting the effort into doing this, because this is what it's about, supporting our community. And of course, if anyone did have any questions or wanted to follow you, message you on Instagram, is that okay with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's ESA Wilkinson, PhD. on Instagram, or we also have a gym. So my husband and I own a gym, which is AW Muscle and Fitness. So like I said, I don't actually work with bodybuilders. I work more with lifestyle clients. Saying that, I have worked with bodybuilders that have come out of preps and they've struggled. So my main focus areas are around appetite and eating behavior. So if you do struggle, or you think you're going to struggle, or you just want to reach out and you have some questions, then please just feel free. My inbox is always open.
Thank you, Em. I really appreciate it. And of course, if any of you listening do take value from this and you wanted to share it, we love to see the tags on Instagram stories. So tag us up, and if you've taken something from it, then add that in and we can help spread the word. So thank you, Em. And of course, we're hopefully going to meet up soon. So hopefully I will see you in person very, very soon.
Yes, take care.
See you later.